This is The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Roadmap, exclusively here on ASBN.com. I'm Lee Heisman, and every week we bring you some of the brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business owners who are climbing the ladder, scaling their businesses, and thinking one day about how to exit stage left. Today, I'm here talking with Emily Best, who is the CEO and founder of Seed&Spark. Seed&Spark with no spaces.
Yep, that's right.
Hello, Emily. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for coming to our humble studios because this TV and production is your world. You've been a singer, a producer, an actress, and also the founder of Seed&Spark. Talk about how you got into this industry in the first place.
Oh, I mean, that's a very long story. I would say that really it started, I was 16 years old, and a friend of mine who was way cooler than me took me to the only independent movie theater in my hometown of Sacramento, California, and took me to an Iranian film by the very famous director, Mokmobaf, and we saw a film called Gabe, which had played at Cannes that year.
Wow.
None of these things I had heard of before.
Who else has heard of it? I'm not sure if anybody has.
And I went and sat in this theater thinking that like all I would get out of it was to be able to say I had seen a foreign film, and I could not get out of my seat when the credits started rolling. Like I was changed forever.
Wow.
And I think that gave me an impression of the impact of cinema, but specifically independent cinema and independent cinema spaces, and that kind of storytelling that can really just transform, you know, this little girl in Sacramento, California's entire view of what the world is and can be.
So talk a little about Seed&Spark, right?
Yeah.
First, how did you come up with the name? And then what do you do there?
So Seed&Spark is the #1 crowdfunding platform in the world for diverse storytelling. We have raised over $52 million for more than 4,100 incredible independent storytelling projects, mostly film and TV, all formats, but also lots of theater and dance and music and books and podcasts.
So it's just entertainment across the board.
That's right, yeah.
Not just film, entertainment across the board.
Yeah, and we center it around storytelling because that tends to be the intention of the folks behind it, and the medium is a little bit less important.
Fair. So this industry, the production industry, telling a story, all the mediums, I love the way you say the medium doesn't matter, it's telling a story.
Yeah.
The barrier to entry to get into this. Everybody wants to, but it's so difficult. What advice do you have for people?
Well, it's so interesting because these days, they're kind of, the barriers to entry are different than we traditionally think about them. So these days, it's like, can I get a device in my hand? It's technology. And can I get the education I need? And most of it is actually available online, and most of it already exists on your phone. Right? We see creators being able to make unbelievable cinema. I mean, even some very famous creators now shooting on their phones, which shoot in 4K at this point. It's really education that is the barrier, right? Is access to the information that you need to start making things. So the barrier to making things has gone almost to zero. However, the industry at large, like if you're looking towards Hollywood, I mean, the barrier to entry there is network, right? It can be resources.
It's who you know that gets you there and what you know that keeps you there. Is that right? A little bit?
Yes, and I mean, the Hollywood Diversity Report came out recently, and we see that even very well-regarded women, writers, directors, movies helmed by women are funded like 5 to 10 times less. Their budgets are 5 to 10 times less on average than films helmed by men. So I would say that like, yes, it can be who you know that gets you there, and what you know maybe isn't worth all that much in an industry that's still really struggling with how to distribute resources equitably.
Fair.
I think at the end of the day, what we do see now that is stronger than ever before are the local communities, the local creator communities as launch points for all sorts of careers.
Well, I wanted you to elaborate on that a little bit. And it's funny you mentioned the iPhone, because if you watch an iPhone commercial over the past few years, you see producers filming or directors filming with the iPhone. So if you're right about the barrier to entry, because if you watch a commercial, you can see that that availability is there. But elaborate on your business model a little bit more, just so people understand how you do help this community get the funding it needs.
Yeah, so Seed&Spark is a crowdfunding platform, actually has kind of 4 essential components. And the first thing we do is a whole lot of free education. So we have almost 1,000 partners across the country, film festivals, film schools, artist service organizations, unions, that we partner with to deliver free education, usually around how to leverage crowdfunding and the tools that you need for successful crowdfunding to build a really strong, independent, sustainable career. Right? Because they're actually all the same tools. But we teach pitching and we teach, film budgeting, we teach all sorts of things, and we make it accessible for free, oftentimes in person through our partners. That's the first big component of our business. The second is the crowdfunding platform, right? Creators come to the platform, they build projects, they launch them. The third component of our business that I think is really important is that every single crowdfunding campaign on Seed&Spark has the opportunity to be evaluated by an expert on our team, who will make sure that the campaign is actually set up for success. And that is why we have the highest crowdfunding campaign success rate in the world. So our campaign success rate's about 83%.
Wow.
And the next closest platform, which is the one you probably most recognize, their campaign success rate is in the high 30s, low 40s%.
I mean, you're more than double.
More than double, yeah.
The success rate. And it sounds like it's because of the structure that you created.
That's right.
With the experts that can see the landmines in advance and can kind of preset things up so you don't run into those obstacles.
Yes, and I would argue it's because we really push the education before anybody launches a campaign. So we make sure they're set up with the tools and the know-how to succeed. The fourth component of our business that it's important to me to mention is that we have, over the last 2 years, launched what's called the Patrons Fund. And the Patrons Fund is a nonprofit fund that sits alongside Seed&Spark. Most of our patrons are very well-known and active creators and producers, people like Mark Duplass from The Morning Show, Jason Reitman, who directs, he's Hollywood royalty, but he directs the Ghostbusters movies these days. Alex Kurtzman, who stewards the Star Trek franchises. They're an example of some of the contributors to the Patrons Fund. And the patrons give us a chunk of money and they tell us what sorts of projects they want to accelerate. And then that money gets distributed as no application grants to campaigns already funding on Seed&Spark. So if you launch a campaign on Seed&Spark, you might get an email one day that's just like, here's an extra $1,000 to $5,000 to your campaign.
Wow.
And that's been an incredible accelerant for us.
Well, you're doing a lot of accelerants, and but going back to the industry in general, you have issues with inclusiveness, diversity, of course. How is the industry in a whole? Is it moving in the right direction, or do you think we're stagnant, and that's where the value of yours comes from?
So there's a couple of things happening. We have to first say, yes, there have been substantial gains across every category in terms of who's writing, who's directing, who's producing. We started from such a terrible place that to make substantial gains doesn't actually get us anywhere where we need to be, right? So we still see that 1.5 out of every 10 blockbuster film directors is a person of color, not even 2 out of 10 in terms of like who's in front of the camera is a woman. Like there's just, we got a long way to go, right? And every year UCLA and USC each release different parts of these diversity in Hollywood reports that really help hold the industry accountable. Where I think the challenge comes is that the streaming platforms deliver everything via algorithm. And so audiences have a very different perception of what's happening, right? So if everything gets delivered to you, once the algorithm figures out who you are, it starts to actually populate your screen to look more like you. So whereas the industry really has a long way to go, the audiences are not necessarily feeling the pain in the same way. However, what we do see is that more than 60% of the people who show up on opening weekend for a given film are people of color. They are the people who are driving box office success. And films with north of 40% diversity in the cast outperform everyone else.
That's wonderful.
I wish that changed the composition of how films were made and produced and who the decision makers were a lot faster, but the economy or like the market forces are giving very clear signals about the direction the industry needs to move. I think the challenge is that like the audiences don't feel the gap as much because of the way streaming has entered into our lives.
So that is, the term perception is reality.
That's right.
Fortunately or unfortunately, you're exactly right. The algorithms that you said, and what's scary, that know who we are. If you're a woman, a female, or an individual, a minority individual, you might see nothing but films that fit your your geographic or
your Netflix homepage will look completely different and a lot like you.
Exactly. And you'll think, oh, the diversity is being fulfilled here, but the
That's
reality
right.
is it's not, but you wouldn't know it because perception is reality.
That's
wow.
right. That's why I constantly try to drive people. Not everybody wants to read like giant industry reports, but there are always these great synopses that come out in, the Hollywood Reporter or some of the trades every year that kind of give you the high level on how are we doing vis-a-vis these diversity reports.
Yep.
And that's where the real information is. And every single year they remind us that more diverse representative films perform better. Full stop.
Yeah.
And so we hope that the industry just continues to really pull in that direction.
But a part of Seed&Spark is Film Forward.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So because of this algorithmic gap between the filmmakers that are making the films and who they want to reach versus who their films are reaching, which tend to be people who look like them and think like them, we wanted to build a mechanism where filmmakers could really achieve the impact of their films. And so we built Film Forward. And Film Forward curates some of the best short cinema specifically from our network. And delivers it to replace boring, crappy corporate training videos.
And what is short cinema? Just for our audience, what is short cinema?
Like 15 minutes and under, right?
So is it a full story? Is it just a little segment? What is that?
No, these are fully realized films, but the beauty of a short is it can be what it wants. Sometimes they are sort of contemplations, sometimes they are 3-act structures, but the beauty of a short is that it can exist in a lot of different formats and genres, and they tend to be as close to the filmmaker's vision as anything you'll ever see. So you get these incredible diverse perspectives from short cinema in ways you just simply won't anywhere else. And that's part of what makes them magical teaching tools. And so we've built a suite of professional development programs, and we sell Film Forward into corporations because the workplace is the most diverse place most people are in their lives. And so it's an opportunity to deliver these films to audiences who would never otherwise see them. And it's every week we get a note from someone saying that film changed my life. I took it home and I watched it with my family. I want to know what the impact was.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's really unbelievable. Yeah, and part of the framework of these programs is actually to help organizations scale their capacities of inclusion, resilience, leadership, performance and innovation, but leveraging this incredible tool, and it pays the creators a pretty good chunk of change too.
So to be a little selfish, I want to see these now. How does a common person see these films that a corporation has for their staff? How would a common person view them? That's
a great question. That is the next phase of our business model will be eventually to turn this into something that's public facing, but we're not there yet.
So all these magical diamonds we don't have access to?
Some of them you might. So we don't require exclusivity for Film Forward. So you might find them as shorts that are streaming on PBS. You might find them as Oscar shorts, which typically are available in other places. You might find them on Vimeo or YouTube occasionally. But the great tragedy to me of short cinema is that there isn't a place for them. There's not actually really a market for short cinema. And yet creators make them anyway because they have to tell stories. And that's why, again, I say they're really magical little units of storytelling. And so we also wanted to be a place that shorts could go, not just to deliver impact, but to really meaningfully make money and reach audiences that they would never otherwise reach.
Amazing. Wow. I'm blown away. I know exactly what I'm going to say in my close, but before I do, because I'm going to push this, but before I do, how do people get in touch with you, Emily? Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, we're at Seed&Spark on pretty much all of the channels, and you can also find Film Forward at filmforward.io. And seedandspark.com.
I always get a smile on my face every time I've finished something with you, of course, and I've learned more and more about the industry from you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
For our viewers out there, before I wrap this up, we've been very fortunate here at the Roadmap to be a part of ASBN because we are now on Apple TV and Roku. And I see in your future, Emily, and I see in the future a little icon up there. When I open up my Apple TV, I see a little icon that says Film Forward. And if I click it, I've got hundreds or 200 little mini films that I could watch. That's the future.
I love it.
I would love that. I would love to see that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching and joining our show today. I hope this was insightful for you. I know it was for me. We hope to see you again next week on another episode of The Roadmap.
Thanks for watching The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.